I'm Zahal Reed, Senior Attorney in Medmarc's Risk Management Department. I would like to welcome you back to Medmarc's Risk Management video series on clinical trials. In our prior video, I provided you with an overview of clinical trials. In today's video, we will discuss the products liability implications of clinical trials. I will begin with a quick overview of products liability law as it applies to the life sciences industry. I will then discuss how products liability may become an issue for those running clinical trials, and lastly, what you can do to reduce your exposure to liability. Generally, a products liability claim may be brought under four theories: strict products liability, negligence, a breach of express warranty, or a breach of implied warranty. Whether negligence or strict liability is applied will be decided based on the jurisdiction, as there is no federal law for products liability. Most states use the theory of strict liability in application to products liability cases. For our purposes, these products liability cases stem from some harm that resulted from using a medical device, pharmaceutical, or biologic. A typical claim will assert that there was a design defect, a manufacturing defect, or there was defective marketing, otherwise known as a failure to warn. A design flaw means that the design of the product was unreasonably dangerous. A manufacturing defect claim generally means that the product was designed correctly, but there was some error which led to a failure to warn claim. Manufacturers have a duty to inform the user about how to use the product safely and to warn about the possible risks associated with their product. That means that they may be required to test their product to discover the risks, and they must communicate those risks on the warning label or the instructions for use. The manufacturer must determine foreseeable misuse of the product and warn the user accordingly. Parties to a products liability claim may include the component parts manufacturer, the manufacturer assembling the parts, the distributors, the suppliers, the retailers, and any third party responsible for labeling the product. Exposure to liability may be dictated by the terms of the contracts that govern these relationships. What are some factors that you should be aware of to mitigate products liability exposure in the course of your study? The products you are testing may injure a test subject in the course of the trial. The potential injury, and therefore your liability exposure, will differ based on the type of product that you are testing. For example, there will be a difference in exposure between testing a low-risk product like a wearable device versus a high-risk product like a new injectable drug. This should factor into your product's liability risk management plan. Another consideration is the purpose of the clinical trial. A study that aims to determine safety and efficacy of a new use for a previously approved drug will have a different risk profile than a study that uses a wearable device to monitor cardiac output. Furthermore, your product's liability exposure will change drastically based on the characteristics of your study population. Bodily injury to children during the course of a clinical trial will have different products liability implications than bodily injury to terminally ill elderly study participants. So what can you do to minimize the product's liability risks of a clinical trial? We will review the role of the sponsor and principal investigator, the informed consent process, participant eligibility criteria, clinical staff qualifications, and the importance of contracts. Recall from previous videos that the sponsor of a clinical trial will be responsible for filing the appropriate application with the FDA and for obtaining approval for the trial's inception. The sponsor may be the manufacturer of the product being tested. The sponsor's responsibilities under 21 CFR 312.50 include selecting qualified investigators, providing them with the information they need to conduct the investigation properly, ensuring proper monitoring of the investigation, and ensuring that the FDA and all participating investigators are promptly informed of significant new adverse effects or risks. It is important for the sponsor to fully assess potential products liability risks prior to commencing clinical trials. Another important actor is the principal investigator. The principal investigator is the individual who actually conducts the clinical investigation, and they are responsible for documenting the delegation of study responsibilities to qualified research staff, supervising the performance of the study, and overseeing the study staff and ensuring that all study procedures are conducted in accordance with the study protocol and good clinical practices. Maintaining an organized structure to the clinical trials and ensuring compliance with good clinical practices will be crucial to minimizing products liability risks. It can decrease the risk of bodily injury to the study participants, and it can increase the chances of taking corrective actions if a product's liability risk is identified during the course of the study. Next, we will look at the informed consent process. The informed consent process is critical to managing the product's liability risk of your clinical trial. As the product or the use of the product being tested is unapproved, test subjects should understand and appreciate that there is a risk of an adverse effect. The problem from a liability perspective comes when that risk is not understood or appreciated by the subject. A good informed consent form clearly and fully conveys the risks of the trial to the participant. It also discloses the methods of testing, sources of funding, any possible conflicts of interest, institutional affiliations of the researcher, and anticipated benefits of the study. There are regulatory requirements covering both form and substance of the informed consent document, which can be found in 45 CFR 116-117. Another way to mitigate your product's liability risks is to establish participant eligibility criteria carefully to avoid unforeseen adverse events. Participants must not be allowed to self-identify the characteristics or conditions that make them appropriate candidates for the study. Instead, the presence of these characteristics or conditions should be independently verified either through a review of the medical records or through verifications by diagnostics performed by independent clinicians. Selecting qualified investigators and clinical staff. This is essential in maintaining the integrity of the trial and results, ensuring the safety of participants and avoiding liability. Investigators should have extensive training in good clinical practices and experience in conducting trials of similar size and scope. All investigators must sign and submit an FDA Form 1572 Statement of Investigator to the trial sponsor. An additional tool that many might overlook is the importance of vetting your institutional review board, or IRB. This is incredibly important for preventing ethical abuses and potential liability. We will take a closer look at IRBs in upcoming videos. Lastly, one of the best risk management tools companies have at their disposal is the use of contracts. Contracts can and should lay out the procedures and respective obligations of the parties in the event of an adverse effect. It should also contain mutual indemnification provisions whereby the sponsor is indemnified by the trial site and principal investigator, respectively, for losses arising out of each party's own negligence. In addition, each party should be required by contract to carry sufficient insurance to fully cover any potential losses. Ideally, the sponsor will want to require that it be named as an additional insured on the party's policy. Proof of compliance with this requirement in the form of certificates of insurance should be provided to the involved parties. This concludes our video on the products liability implications of clinical trials, and we hope you will join us for our next video, where we will discuss the informed consent process of clinical trials in more detail. That concludes our video for today.